Hello and welcome to this brief roundup of Harvest 2022. We're standing here in the Pentland Hills just south of Edinburgh. Got an opportunity now just to reflect on the season and see how the harvest went, and for many places September has brought well over 50 mils of rain, so as we move into the cultivation period there's plenty of rape that's gone in the ground and is chitting away nicely. But in terms of the harvest, well, apart from a few pockets of spring barley and a few pockets of spring beans, obviously the harvest is off, and by all accounts it seems to have been one of the earliest harvests we've had for about 25 years. Certainly the rape was all off by the 15th of August. The yields across the area won't break any records, and it's surprising that perhaps they're not as high as we thought they might be. Wheat seems to have averaged between 8.2 and 8.6 tonnes a hectare. Winter barley between 7.2 and 7.4 tonnes a hectare, and both oats and spring barley getting up towards the 5.9 tonnes a hectare. Rapeseed's only reported to have been roughly in the region of 3.2 to 3.6 tonnes a hectare, which is surprising because the feedback I've had is that there are some pretty heavy yields out there. So my guess is that whilst that's the average, there is quite a range of yields across the crops. Perhaps one would imagine in such a dry summer it's a heavy land that's produced the yields, and certainly some of the spring barley is on the lighter land that got drought prone. There has been issues there on yield delivery on spring barley, with talk of perhaps some growers on lighter land moving towards autumn sown crops if this sort of climatic change is to continue with the dry springs that we're getting. It's worth noting too that actually a lot of the 1,000 grain weights are going to be high. The specific weights on wheat and barley is high for the season, so when you're saving that seed for drilling, just bear in mind that you're drilling big seed, and if you're aiming for so many plants per square metre, you probably have to put the seed rate up from what you'd normally expect to get those number of seeds per metre squared in the ground. Another feature of the harvest was that proteins were fairly low in wheat specifically, and I think that was due to the dry summer where nitrogen efficiency uptake was pretty poor. Hagbergs have been fine, but as most of the wheat's grown for distilling here in Scotland, the demand for the 13% protein in the wheat isn't a requirement anyway. For the UK as a whole, it seems that the wheat harvest is going to produce just shy of 16 million tonnes, which is a big crop, and we should have an exportable surplus of about 2 million tonnes to trade out of the country over the forthcoming season. Here in Scotland, the demand for distilling wheat has grown significantly, probably up 20% on last year, and that's going to support the local prices for the distilling wheat varieties that are grown here. In the same way too, the processing capacity in Scotland for malting barley has risen again, and that'll certainly help to underpin prices more locally too. Wheat currently in the borders is trading about £265 a tonne for September, and roughly a £10 a tonne premium to wheat coming out of England. What's the 6-month outlook for wheat? It's still fairly bullish, and it really reflects the concerns of the global supply issues, but it's lessened somewhat by the very good harvests that are reported to be coming out of North America and Australia. Much of the pricing mechanism will also depend this winter on the rate of exports out of the Black Sea region and just how quickly they gain in volume. Oilseed rape is currently trading about just over £500 a tonne. The future trading positions for rape post-Christmas are fairly uncertain. Europe's deemed to have increased its production of oilseed rape this year by over 13%. And the US and Canada have also had good harvests, so it is potentially a crop that you might want to take a position on earlier rather than later on this season. The final word perhaps on grain storage, and with such a rapid harvest and grain going into store so quickly, and with the ambient temperatures being as high as they were during the harvest, there's going to be a lot of grain stores there with grain that's going to need cooling fairly promptly. And as the weather windows sort of open for farmers to get on and get crops in, you've got to install a pretty rigorous approach to cooling your grain such that it's cooled quickly and efficiently. And in terms of getting the temperature down, you really want to try and get the temperature down to below 10 degrees C, certainly by Christmas, and 15 degrees C by mid-October. So do bear that in mind if you are storing grain for sale post-Christmas. So to sum up, it's been an early harvest of good quality and probably more reasonable yields than we would have expected. But at the same time, there's a lot of uncertainty looking forward as to the input costs for the following crop, and with the nitrogen production facilities closing, reducing substantially in England, a lot of that nitrogen has got to come in from abroad, and with the weak sterling, that's only going to push up the prices.